So welcome folks to another Digital Transformation Lab podcast. My name is Darragh O'Riordan and we're doing a podcast. It's part of our customer success series, but today we're talking about customer experience. And I'm delighted that we have Michael Killeen here with us today. Michael has a wealth of CX experience working with large multinationals and scaling companies, spent 10 years in the US working with General Electric, working on building out their CX program. He's also worked with some big name clients like Miller Beer, American Airlines, and one of my favorites, Harley Davidson, to name but a few. Michael, welcome. Great to be talking to you today.
Thank you so much. Listen, delighted to, and it's great to know that customer experience is landing in the customer success kind of podcast series. So no, very, very happy to chat with you today, Darragh. Great stuff.
Brilliant. Michael, as I always do, the first thing I ask guests is if they can tell us a little bit about themselves professionally and anything that you'd like to share about yourself personally as well.
Delighted to. My background is I was a marketeer, and as you mentioned earlier, I was very lucky. I spent a number of years in the States. I got to work with some great brands, but you learn so much when you're over there. They really do. It's a phenomenal market to learn your trade. And I came back to Ireland and I set up a company called Dialogue, which is a marketing communications agency. And it was about 7 or 8 or 9 years ago, I think it was, when we turned around and said, you know what, marketing is losing respect. And we needed to see if we could re-engineer ourselves into a new discipline. And we did, because I started my career with GE Medical in the States, and I was working in CX at that stage. So I've always kept an eye on that discipline to see how it was going. And I just felt the timing was right because it was starting to surge again. And we set up the CX company about 9 years ago, and we do an annual report here domestically in the Irish market, which ranks and celebrates the customer experience excellence. But we also now take that into the global market. So we have a really good understanding of which companies are doing brilliantly well, and unfortunately, which companies are not. So that's something we can cover. Something else we did about 3 years ago, we decided that there was a gap in the market in terms of education. CX was a discipline that was mixed up an awful lot with customer service, and they are two different disciplines. So we launched the CX Academy, which is an online academy where we offer accredited certifications and diplomas, and we're adding new products all along. And that's gone tremendously well for us. We now are in 72 countries. We're the largest educators in customer experience globally now. So it really has been tremendously successful for us. And I think the timing of the pandemic, et cetera, kind of worked in our favor. We kind of leveraged that as an opportunity rather than as a negative. So that's kind of a little bit about my background.
Excellent. And I love that CX program that you're running. And it's just interesting that you mentioned that sometimes customer experience seems to get mixed up with, seems to be a variety of perceptions out there that, maybe a small part of it, but not customer experience in itself. Can you tell me, Michael, what is it about customer experience? Why is CX so critical to business today?
Great question. It certainly is on everybody's agenda, from the C-suite right down to the frontline and even back office staff. We're all engaging in and trying to get our heads around how we can leverage customer experience. And I think maybe it's worth stepping back a bit. Let me address the question: what is it? Because that's something that everybody should know. We have a very, very simple definition, which is around basically it's how your customers feel after they've interacted with your business. That's the simple definition. So when you think about customer service is quite functional. It's less emotional, whereas customer experience is very emotional because it's, is the customer pulling his hair out? Is he delighted? Is he smiling? Is he referring you on to other people, etc.? That's what customer experience is. It really is that emotional. How do I feel after just addressing you? And I suppose one of the key things that we've noted, there was a very interesting piece of research done by Bain in New York about 6 years ago, where they interviewed 1,300 CEOs globally across a whole range of different sectors. And they asked them the question, does your business deliver an exceptional customer experience to your customers? And 80% of the CEOs agreed that they did. And they asked the same question to the customers of those companies, and only 8% of the customers agreed with that statement. So we created this 88 rule. It's a phenomenal gap when you think about it. 80% saying yes, and 8% going, or sorry, was it 92% saying absolutely not?
Yeah.
And it's funny, when we backed into that a little bit, we said, why is that case? It's not like we have, every CEO around the world is misleading us. It's not. They just misunderstand what CX really is. And I think if you look at it as kind of, how I feel after I've dealt with you, that clarifies a lot. And it also raised the question, there really is a gap out there, and we need to fix that through educating CX practitioners about what it is they're actually doing. And I love your series, the customer success session. CX is very much part of that. So let me answer your question. Your question to me here was, why has CX become critical? And initially, I thought that the main reason for the significant investment by large companies globally was to do with this huge growth in customer advocacy and that particular space. And it turns out that the majority of the big enterprise companies are unfortunately investing in CX because it's been forced upon them by regulators, etc. So if you look at the financial sector, or maybe the telco sector, or utilities, there's bodies there that are forcing these banks and utilities, you've got to invest in customer. So a lot of companies are investing in the customer for the wrong reasons. They're not doing it because they are absolutely committed. And we talk a little bit about it. But the key reasons why it's so critical is that it's the only way today that you can differentiate your company against your competitors. So when you think of it, I'll use the examples of, let's say, the banking system. Most banks offer pretty much the same products, the same price points, and the same customer service to back those up. So really, the only way to truly differentiate in the world today is through customer experience. And when you think about it, the growth in advocacy. So one of the things that we have noted is that everybody's job in the world today has changed. It's not about selling your company to your customers or to prospects. Your job today is about giving your customers the most incredible experience so that they do the selling on your behalf. That's the way the world is changing. So advocacy is becoming quite significant in the world of business. And when you give customers an amazing experience, they will share that with others. And we see it in trust pilots and so on in the online world. But we also, when you think about it, just Darragh, think about it yourself. The last time you went to a restaurant or you went out to the cinema to watch a movie, it was probably stimulated by somebody saying, you've got to go down and check out this new restaurant, or I had a great experience with my mobile phone company the other day, etc. These are the kind of things that actually, because they're unbiased, we react brilliantly to them. We've lost so much trust in marketing and advertising today that we are starting much more to rely on a colleague, a friend, a family member. That's just a natural thing that's been happening for years and years. And then finally, in terms of why it's critical, it's a great cost saving for companies. If you are giving customers a wonderful experience, they're not contacting you with complaints or asking you for issues. So that is a simple reduction in costs. And then you also have the whole side of the employee experience. It's quite significant today. Employee experience is really driving, particularly after the pandemic. Companies are starting to really appreciate what we need to do is develop a clear purpose that aligns with not just our customers, but our employees as well. And as a marketeer, I always grew up with that saying that the customer was king. And it's something we all kind of live with. And I just got it wrong. And I've been a marketeer for nearly 30 years. And I just realized, oh my God, the staff are king. It's this kind of happy staff equals happy customer. And if you don't get that right, you won't be able to deliver great experiences. And in fact, one of the key elements when we study customer experience champions around the world, the one thing they all have in common, happy staff. Staff who have a purpose, staff who are given the tools to be empowered to deliver great experiences. give them the training to do that kind of stuff. So, they're the kind of key reasons why customer experience is growing at a phenomenal rate. I didn't even mention the reduction in churn, but you can guess, that's a key challenge for many companies today is how do we hang on to our customers, give them a great experience, they will stay with you forever. And it's so there's a lot of good return on investment angles that support investment in customer experience.
That makes total sense. And as you're talking there, Michael, I'm thinking that you can't do without it, and I've had so many experiences myself where it is people saying to me, try this out, that it really is the driver. And any sort of negative experience in the whole engagement with any type of company can be, detrimental to everything else about it. But they're really cool insights. And Michael, one of the things I've been looking forward to asking you about, because I know you have a great template to help companies in building out their customer experience program. I'd like to ask you maybe about the fundamentals of CX, about the fundamentals of customer experience. And brilliant. Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to share this with you. Can you see that okay, Darragh?
Yeah, that looks good. Can you make it a small bit bigger, actually?
I certainly can. Hopefully, does that work? Are you picking that up?
Actually, if you try, see down the bottom right-hand side, if you bring the bar over to the right, I think it might. Oh, yeah, perfect. Yeah, lovely.
Let's see if this works, because it'll make my job a lot easier. We created a framework, and everybody loves a framework. And the beauty about this is a customer experience excellence framework. So if you want to deliver customer experience excellence, the challenge here is you've got to deliver on these 6 drivers consistently. So if you're strong in one and weak in others, it will collapse. If you're strong in 5 and weak in 1, it will collapse. It's about getting consistency. And the beauty about this framework is we use it every single day, as in the people who are listening to this podcast, they'll recognize that they're doing this every single day. So there's nothing new about it, but we all love the framework. So let me walk you through. What I'm going to do here is I'll walk you through the framework, and then I'll bring it to life with some examples of really simple examples of best practice. So the first one is all about I trust you. And everybody works on their trust every single day. And this is without doubt the most important of the 6 drivers we have. And time again, we've seen companies who fail in that trust area just collapse in terms of their delivery. The second one is all about me. It's about personalization. It's about how does your company understand my needs? And this is an area that's probably the most impactful, not the most important, but most impactful. If you were to focus on one area, it would be around this whole area of personalization, getting to know your customers brilliantly and designing solutions for their needs, not the company's needs. And then the third one is probably where most of the activity is taking place today globally, is you make it easy. So, how does your business make it easy for your customers to do business with you? And that's brought in a huge shakeup, particularly in that digital platform. Digital is coming in and it's making a much more convenient world for many customers, but it's not the answer to all ills. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through this process. The fourth one is all about empathy. You get me. How do you genuinely understand what it's like to be in my shoes today? And it's an area that really is difficult to do consistently time and time again. And the fifth one is about delivering on your promise. And again, this is about managing, meeting, and exceeding your customers' expectations. And we've been tracking this particular driver globally over the last number of years, and this is where the biggest failure is right now, is that we overpromise and underdeliver. And that happens in certain sectors more so than others. Retail are actually getting better at it. Telco, off the planet, they're constantly overpromising and underdelivering. So it's some challenges there. And then finally, you have this whole area of fixing things. When something goes wrong, how do you fix that heroically? Because when you fix a problem with a customer, they'll put the phone down and they'll turn around to a colleague and go, "You won't believe what just happened." And it's a wonderful way to create advocacy, because there are not many companies out there that excel in fixing things. So I think it's a very underutilized driver that we have. In fact, I know that our last piece of research, we said that only 1 in 7 customers will tell a company why they are leaving. And so there's 6 other individuals out there. And so if somebody bothers to pick up the phone and say, look, I have a problem with you, you should embrace them and hug them and say, thank you for calling us. We're going to deal with this. It's just a different way of approaching complaints, etc. So all of those 6 drivers lead to a much deeper bond, which is kind of in that whole loyalty space. So it gives you an indication, and even yourself, Darragh, from your own experiences, I suspect you have worked across each of those drivers time and time again. So I'm not teaching you anything new. The challenge here, as I said earlier, doing them consistency. So if I try to bring these to life, these are examples of projects that we would work on. This is one for Nissan. I think what they do in the old trust, because I think their sector is sometimes it's considered to be kind of in that cowboy space where you drop your car in and you have no idea what sort of a bill you get when you return. But what companies like Nissan are doing is they're leveraging technology and the human touch, where in this case you have a technician who's taking a customer, he's found something and said, look, I think we need to fix this. It could be the tires require being replaced, but they video it and send it to you. And it makes it so easy for the customer to then make that decision. And it increases that whole trust area. So again, as I said to you, it's the most important driver, but it's also, it takes years and years and years to build up trust, and it can take seconds to lose it. So we really have to be careful about how we deal with this. This is a lovely story about the second driver, which is all about personalization. This is a girl called Jennifer that I walked into with a colleague of mine. We were going into a meeting in a business park, and it was actually a major technology company. And we went in, and Jennifer said, would I like a loyalty card? I just got in there and I said, oh, sure. It's one of these cards that you stamp 8 or 9 times, and when you fill it, you get a free coffee, etc. But she said to me, look in front of this picture, there's a little tray there. She keeps all of her loyalty cards in that tray. And I said, why do you do that? She says, well, customers are always forgetting the loyalty card. They forget to give it to me, etc. It's my job to know every customer who comes in here by name. So when you come in here, Michael, I say, Michael, here you go, and I'll stamp it there for you. And I'm going, I mean, that's just phenomenal. That is one of the most simple, like, she knows my name. And as you know, Darragh, anytime you engage with a business, I mean, there's a famous line that says the one word humankind prefers over any other is your name. And, it's just to do that simply. So Jennifer, we posted a little note about her, and, I got 122,000 kind of likes, so it was a very viral kind of situation. But how simple was that you have a human loyalty program? It was just absolutely epic. Brilliant. Then you get into, you make it easy. And this is kind of, how do you make it easy for all of your customers to do business? And I love the Amazon Prime wardrobe example. They do this brilliantly. They allow you to order up to 15 units. You get to try them at home in your own wardrobe. So you're mixing stuff with what you already have. I mean, talk about making it easy. And then if you buy 2 items or 3 items, the more items you buy, the bigger the discount you get. And for those items you don't want, you simply call them, they come and pick up the package free. I mean, it's just phenomenal how retail is really recognizing that we do need to have better ways of doing business with them. And again, I suppose I love this one around empathy. You can imagine being a patient, and hopefully none of us have had to and will ever have to experience this, but being a patient in hospital with COVID as an example, waking up and seeing these people looking after you, they look quite alien. And the paranoia and the scaredness of, oh my God, I'm sick and I'm being looked after by people I don't know. And they simply put a photograph on their costume with their name to show that they were genuinely human people. How beautiful was that? So here's healthcare workers around the world just doing simple little things because they recognize what's going through the minds of their patients at that time. And then we talk about delivering on your promise. And this is all about managing, meeting and exceeding expectations. And I think, if you look at Domino's, one of their biggest issues was, when they place an order with them online or whatever, people are calling, where are you? Where are you? So they created the pizza tracker. And it's just a lovely way to make things easy for you, but also deliver on your promise. And I think their promise at that time was, if we don't deliver within 30 minutes, you get your pizza free. So a very, very clever way of just making life really, really good. And this one is all about you fix things. And I think it's one of my favorite. JetBlue is I would describe them as a boutique kind of East Coast airline in the United States. And every year, Darragh, I don't know if you've ever been on a plane or you ever had the experience of having to bring your kids on a flight. You walk on the plane and everybody's looking at you and going, mother of God, keep going, keep going, keep going. It's a horrible experience, particularly if you're a mom. And what JetBlue do every Mother's Day, they run a promotion whereby if any child cries or makes any noise or upsets other passengers, they get a free round trip ticket. It's beautifully delivered. So now you can imagine it's announced on the flight. Good morning, everybody. Welcome, everybody. And today, let's welcome all the mums today for Mother's Day. And we have 4 or 5 kids on board. And if one of the children cry today, we'll give you a 10% discount. If 4 of them cry, we'll give you a round trip free ticket. What happens? All the passengers throw popcorn at the kids. They're fidgeting. It's a wonderful way to develop advocacy, because I think, you know, when you come back into the office the next day and someone says, Mike, how was your holiday? You'd be like, I had a lovely holiday, but wait till I tell you about my experience on JetBlue yesterday. So I've become a natural advocate for this brand. And I would say to you, I'd argue, Darragh, that if JetBlue had to run say $1 million campaign to say we are the most empathetic, the most trustworthy, the most customer-focused airline in the world, no one would believe them. But when Michael Killeen comes back into the office and says, you won't believe my experience yesterday, they do believe me because I am unbiased. So there's really simple examples of how we bring those 6 drivers together. And it's, again, you know, for people who are interested in learning more about it, then just check out the CX Academy, because that's where all of this is brought to light. I don't mean to plug Darragh, but that's where, you know, the courses that we do are all based around these 6 drivers and how to leverage them and how to figure out how you're scoring in them at the moment. So it's a simple framework, and I hope it could be useful to anybody listening to this to help them deliver CX excellence to their own business.
Brilliant, brilliant, and plug away, Michael. One of the things that I'm hoping people get out of this are places to go to learn more about CX, and they're fantastic examples. I love that pizza. I loved all of them. That pizza tracker was super cool. I think it's just so good to know where your delivery is in terms of how long you've got to wait, and seeing that progress somehow just makes it all so simple, but just what a great experience, especially if you're hungry.
I remember talking to Domino's about this, and they said, yeah, they time and time again, they get a phone call from parents to say, you wouldn't believe it, my child is standing by the window with the curtain around their neck going, where's the pizza? Where's the pizza? And it's looking out. And it's just a lovely way to say, look, we make it easy for you. We respect your time. And, you know, so therefore, you know, so customer experience, kind of what this is showing, it's a very simple discipline to understand. Let's keep it that way. Let's not make it fluffy. And my biggest fear about CX progress and growth is that I'm starting to attend presentations where they're getting quite complicated. It's not a complicated discipline. It's a very simple discipline. However, it's hard to deliver it, because it does mean you have to break down silos within companies. You know, it's about all departments now working together, getting IT to make sure that the staff are all engaged in the purpose of the company. Getting, you know, operations to work closely with sales, to work closely with marketing, work closely with IT now. And that's the challenge for most companies, is how can we get each discipline to sit around the same table with the one question: how can we all work together to deliver a better experience for our customers? And that doesn't happen every day. It just doesn't happen. And that's what we're attempting to do, is get more companies to break down those barriers and work together.
That leads us on very nicely, I think, to the next question I wanted to ask you, Michael, is about, you know, who's doing it well, what companies are getting CX right, and what companies are doing it wrong. Or maybe if we don't have to talk about companies, maybe industries. Where are you seeing the good and where are you seeing the bad?
It's a great question. I suppose the best way to look at this would be, there are certain sectors that are very poor at this. I'm going to talk a little bit about the sector breakdown. And then you have individual companies who may be getting involved in customer experience because they're being forced to, or companies who are getting involved in customer experience purely to reduce cost, which isn't really a major benefit to the customer. So a lot of companies get involved in CX with a focus of, we'll do this to make it easy for us to serve our customers. And that's not the way to do that. The way to do customer experience brilliantly is to be focused on the customer and do what's right for them, not what's right for the company. So let's talk about companies who are doing it well and who aren't. Generally, it is accepted globally that the retail sector is where most of the innovation is taking place. So you can look at companies such as, I'd say Patagonia, one of my favorite brands of all time. Patagonia have a purpose which is about, let's save our planet. Let's be sustainable in everything we do. It's not about getting our customers to buy more. It's actually getting them to buy less and repairing some of the gear they have at the moment. They are phenomenal about how they get communities of customers to go out and support the Patagonia brand. You pay a high price point, which is very beneficial to their bottom line. But ultimately, I think Patagonia as a retailer will be one of the best out there, and they're very strong in the online world as well. Then you look at probably the biggest sector in the world would be the financial services. And again, that's where most of the most recent significant investment in technology spend in CX is taking place. Again, just think about this. Unfortunately, the majority of the banks today are getting heavily involved in CX for the wrong reasons. They are being put under pressure by government bodies that are basically saying, you have got to now focus on customers rather than the shareholder. And it's working, but at the same time, unfortunately, banks still aren't understanding. Like we monitor, as you probably know, we've had in our own market here, the credit union as an example. They've been the #1 performer in the 7 years. No other company in the world has done that. And you think about, why is that? When I walk into a credit union, I get a hug. When I walk into a bank, I get an interview. And it's we're seeing a lot of issues there, whereby if I look at the top companies in the world today, they tend to be, like certainly last year, we saw a huge influx of pharmacy, which is kind of in that retail space. And that makes sense because pharmacies stayed open during the pandemic, and therefore they were incredibly committed to their customer base. They did things that no one would ever have thought they would do, but they did a brilliant job. And we saw lots and lots of pharmacy groups arriving into the top 10 customer experience companies globally. It was phenomenal. And then you will always have groups like, for instance, the telco sector. And I use this as an example. If you can see my phone,
yes.
If my phone breaks down, if my coverage breaks down, I'm pulling my hair out. I am going to have a lousy day. So it's quite unfair if you're in the telco services, because it literally will ruin my day if it goes bust. If I go into a supermarket and I'm going for milk and there isn't any milk there, I go next door and I get another bottle of milk. It's not the end of the world. But when my telco drops, I am having a horrible day. And that's why we tend to see the telco sector is generally last in all of the sectors out there, because there's so much pressure on them to deliver, and trying to exceed expectations in telco is very, very, very difficult. And if you look at the companies that are doing very, very well, again, they tend to be companies that exceed expectations. It's no longer good enough just simply to meet expectations, because your and my expectations are going through the roof. I'll give you an example. I use taxis all the time, and this is my way of I'm linked with taxis, and if I'm in the center of town and I click and it'll come back and say, your taxi will be with you in 3 minutes, and I'm going, 3 bloody minutes? God almighty. My expectations have gone through the roof, and it's unfair. But 5 years ago, it would have taken half an hour, and I'm complaining that it's going to take 3 minutes. And you can apply that to consumers all around the world. So I don't compare my bank with another bank. I compare my bank with Amazon. These comparisons are being made, and we compare our next customer experience with the best one we've ever had. Again, it's quite unfair, but that's the way the world is. Consumers' expectations are going through the roof. And during the pandemic, we had a huge amount of new tolerance that was given to companies because they were finding it difficult to source goods, to get goods out, etc. That tolerance is gone. It is gone. We're back to square one again. And if you're not exceeding expectations, then you're not delivering customer experience excellence. It's quite difficult. So look, there are many companies out there who are doing brilliantly well. And I think the things that they tend to have in common is that, I look at the companies who are doing very poorly. And even if you look in our most recent markets, the bottom 5 companies globally are all companies who are fixated with making money for shareholders. That's their purpose in life, making money for shareholders. And those that are at the top are fixated with doing what is right for the customer. So it really is interesting how the world is changing. And I think, again, another example of how the pandemic has accelerated businesses thinking. Businesses today are now looking at customer experience initiatives. You only have to look at what's happening, and I don't mean to date this podcast, but we have the Ukrainian thing going on, and we have Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and Shell's, and all these companies pulling out of Russia. And that's coming down to the fear of boycott. So the customer has a say in these big decisions. They want to support companies with a really strong purpose. So, it really is. You could add that back to why is CX so critical? It has a huge impact on how companies react to consumer concerns. And I think the Ukrainian experience, it'll be interesting to see how that develops over time.
Yeah, that's when I heard the McDonald's news last night, or was it this morning? Like, you'd almost pull in and get a McDonald's on that alone, in sympathy of saying, that was the right thing to do. But of course, the value that it would add to the organization in terms of, how people are going to look at them is enormous. Even as you're talking to me there, like, good customer experience is a massive competitive differentiator. Those companies that are only looking at the shareholders are like probably on a road to nowhere ultimately, unless they've got something that just cannot be matched anywhere else. And it's hard to imagine anything like that these days, except for maybe some extreme circumstances. But that's really interesting and insightful stuff, Michael. Can I ask you, one of the things I'm really interested in around customer experience is the technology side of it, and kind of the technology versus the human touch, and where that sits, where companies should be putting more of their investment.
Yeah, it's something that we talk about day after day. I think there's a huge commitment to technology. Look, technology is here to stay. I don't question that. I never would. And it really is there to make life easier and more convenient for trade between customers and companies. However, what I would say to you is that the digital interactions that have grown significantly during, again, the pandemic are predominantly transactionally based. They provide little opportunity to create that emotional connection that's required to develop and sustain long-term customer relationships. So what we would argue all the time is so many companies are investing significant dollars into their technology platforms, and they're doing it for the wrong reasons. And it's not that I've always felt that, and I hope I don't insult anybody here, but I feel that the majority of the digital plays are not down to it being the right solution. It's been down because they have the best salespeople on the planet working in these major technology companies. And a lot of these projects will fail. There's an accepted discussion globally that only 1/3 of kind of that digital transformation project is successful. The other 2 aren't. And it's like, so we have to be careful. I think it really is about getting a balance. And the big argument today in the CX world is, how can we get the right balance between technology investment and human touch investment? Because consumers today, again, particularly after the pandemic, they want the human touch. So it's about, we're seeing some phenomenal technology plays across the board, but still, consumers still want a human touch when it comes to, certainly if they have a complaint or if there's an issue in terms of their relationship, they do prefer to have a human being there. And it's funny, this isn't an age thing. This is not just elderly people wanting to talk to humans. This is across all age groups, all social classes. When it gets complicated, they would love to have access to. Now, again, technology is doing wonderful work in that, making it easy for you. But at the same time, don't be fooled into investing significantly into technology when you need to balance both with one another. And at the moment, my theory is that too much is being spent in tech plays and not enough in empowering staff to do a lot of that work that consumers and customers really prefer.
That's interesting. It sounds like companies need to be really clear on their objectives first day before the investment starts in order to choose the right path in terms of technology versus humans for that investment.
Yeah, we work with a lot of companies that would be pure tech players. Again, in the financial, you would know all these companies. I don't want to get into specific names, but what tends to happen is they lead, and they tend to be startups who don't have all that history and baggage of a large enterprise that have been around for 50, 60 years. But these startups are coming in and they're playing the game brilliantly. But one of the things we say is that, while they start this year and they have wonderful technology supporting them, it's not a differentiator. It will never be a differentiator because a competitor will come around tomorrow and offer the same thing. And so therefore, time and time again, we're being invited into deep conversations with technology companies who are saying, can you help us figure out what's going down here? We started off with this wonderful platform and it's not doing it anymore. And it tends to be that when you're a startup, you're again fixated with acquisition. That's what everyone's looking at. And when you start to build customer base, there comes a time when you have to say time out. We now have to start focusing on what we have and develop very specific retention programs. And again, that may not be a pure technology play. That could be, human touch. It could be meeting people on the shop floor and just dealing with issues. So yes, technology critical. It's here to stay. But let's just get that balance right. That's really the message we're sharing with everybody out there.
I think that's a really interesting point on the startup piece. That focus on acquisition. Without that, well, you're not going anywhere. But again, in the same vein, if your customers aren't having a good experience, they're probably you're not going to acquire them in the first place, but you're certainly not going to keep them. Where Michael, where can we learn more about CX?
There's a number of, well, first of all, CX is the fastest growing business discipline on the planet today. And again, predominantly because of what we're seeing in the technology space. Where you can learn more, I do feel that there's a huge amount of great knowledge out there, but we have to recognize that we're bombarded with information. And therefore, I love to engage in documentation that's scannable and you can kind of have a quick look at and get some really meaningful insights from, et cetera, rather than having to read very deep white papers, et cetera. Certainly from our own perspective, we have the CX Academy, and that's the cxacademy.org. Please, anybody is interested, just go on to the cxacademy.org and you'll find courses there that cover not just the 6 drivers for customer experience excellence, but other strategies and strategic frameworks that will help you. I'm a big fan of Nunwood. They're a global operator. They're part of the KPMG group in London. They have a CX Excellence Learning Center, and they produce some phenomenal documentation. We work closely with them on the global metrics of CX, and they're an interesting organization. And then you have groups like the CXPA, which are based, a lead group based in the United States. And they have chapters around the various markets, particularly mature markets that are starting to develop. And that's worth exploring your local chapter and seeing if they can help educate. But certainly the Academy was built because there was a gap there, and it's going extremely well. We are now operating, I think I said, in 72 markets. So it's phenomenal. And those courses are designed with us sitting on the same side of the table as the participants. They're not academic. It's all about best practice, best practice, best practice. And it helps you, kind of motivates you and your teams to really understand how best to do it. And what we advise all the time is try and get 2 or 3 members of a team together to do those courses. because you use the course to help build your plans and all that kind of stuff. So certainly we would be aiming or suggesting people don't be afraid. Have a look at those courses. They're superb. They really are good.
Yeah, and if today is anything to go by with some like great examples, I thought the framework you presented there was excellent, Michael. Simple, practical examples in order to get your program up and running. That CX Academy is certainly well worth checking out for anyone who wants to learn more. Michael, I'm after keeping you longer than I said I would. I really appreciate your time. That's been fantastic. I learned so much there myself, and I'm sure anyone else who's watching it will too. So thank you again for joining us today.
Well, Darragh, thank you so much for the invitation, and well done, and looking forward to hear it. It'll be interesting. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.